Good morning. Welcome to First Unitarian Church of St. Louis. Hello, my name is Pam Geppert. I use the she, her pronouns. I serve this congregation as the worship chair. We are glad you joined us this Sunday, and if you are a visitor or a newcomer, we'd like to extend a special welcome. We hope you take the time to fill out a newcomer form down in the lobby of the church, or use the form link in the live stream description. After the service, please join us for coffee and donuts in Fellowship Hall downstairs. If you are attending online, you can connect with each other in the chat, and there's a link to the virtual coffee hour in the weekly e-news. Please sign up. We especially want to welcome families with children. Later in our service, we share joys and concerns submitted through an online form. You can find the link in your order of service in the live stream description, and there are QR codes in the pews and also right up there on the screen. Mark your calendars for Saturday, June the 8th, to attend the ordination of longtime member George Grimm Howell. We are hosting the service here at 2 p.m., and you may attend either online or in person. Then, the next day, join area UUs from across the St. Louis region for an all-UU picnic in Tower Grove Park. Services are at 10 a.m. at the individual churches, and the picnic follows at 11:30 at the Turkish Pavilion. See the e-news for what to bring. Save the date for Saturday, June 22nd, also, from 9 to 11 a.m. for our first opportunity to volunteer with Tabernacle CDC. Connect with volunteers and community members in the Jeff Vanderloo area by helping with a neighborhood beautification day. See your e-news, again, for details. Welcome to this religious community where we affirm the dignity and freedom of all who enter. Here we seek to live in relationship and respect so that we may embrace and celebrate our differences. Our religious values invite us to a shared journey of truth and meaning. Sincerity and connection guide our religious community and call us into deeper association with ourselves and our world. Welcome. We are glad you are part of our community this morning. Now please enjoy Andante Sostenuto from Symphonie Gothique by Charles-Marie Widor, performed by our music director, Earl Naylor.
Good morning. I'm going to call your attention to your music notes in your order of service. This morning is Earl's final Sunday with us, and he is playing the two pieces that he used when he auditioned with us 10 years ago. Good morning. I am the Reverend Kim Mason. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I serve this congregation as your minister. Today, we are observing Memorial Day. Call us into worship with these words from the Reverend Nicole McKay. We gather to remember those who could not grow old, and those forced to grow old long before their time. We gather to mourn and grieve with one another all of our losses, the people, the stories, the loved ones, and the futures that could have been, but were not. We gather to do the hard work of facing the difficult realities of our present and our past, where there is conflict, violence, war, and hatred. We gather to hold the space for silence as we try to make meaning of our history so that we might work for peace and justice today. We gather to rekindle our sources of hope for our future by recognizing in one another our shared humanity. And we join in concerted commitment for a better tomorrow. We gather because we need community to do this holy work. Come, let us worship. I invite you to rise as you are willing and able and join in our hymn of the month, number 323, Break Not the Circle.
So, I am drawn to analogies, metaphor, fable, parable, allegory. Analogical reasoning is one of the first cognitive abilities that children develop, and it's one of the primary ways that humans organize their understanding of the world. We compare properties of a known entity to properties of a lesser known entity. Now, you have probably guessed that this is not going to be a reading. Okay. My known entity, the flaming chalice, and by the way, there is no predetermined meaning for this chalice. How Unitarian is that? So, what is the source of the flame? Our ritual has us lighting a taper from a pre-lit votive candle, then using that to light the chalice. But you know, the source could just as easily be a match, or a lighter, or an electric spark, a switch, an ember, a blowtorch. Maybe not, maybe not. My lesser known entity is pluralism. We come to the sacred out of many experiences, beliefs, faith traditions. And just as the chalice's flame can be lit from many sources, the living tradition that we share draws its spark from many sources. And when I light this chalice, let it remind us that we are all sacred beings. May our flames join together to illuminate the love at the center of it all. Rise up, oh
Usually on a holiday weekend, when I get a chance to do the story, there aren't very many kids, but I see some today. Anybody want to come up here with me? And the young and the young at heart. Thank you, Tom. I always tell stories better when I have an audience. Excellent. This morning's story is a true one, written down by UU religious educator Jessica York. You do not have to be rich or famous or even an adult to make a difference. You do not have to have special training or be a president or ruler of a nation. Many people feel passionate about injustices of the world, and they speak out about it. And speaking out can take many forms because everybody has different ways of expressing themselves, just like there are many ways to light our flaming chalice. Here is one example. In 1992, the country of Bosnia-Herzegovina was involved in a civil war. And in a civil war, different groups within one country fight against each other. And war always affects not just the soldiers, but also the civilians. This war was no different. One day at 10 a.m., several people were waiting in line at a bakery when a bomb exploded in the city of Sarajevo, and it killed 22 people. 22 everyday people just waiting to buy bread. Near the bakery lived someone who went to that bakery every day to buy his bread. And so he was terribly distraught when this violence occurred in his city. And he decided to speak up. What might you do to speak up? What would you do to speak up? Any ideas what this person might have done? Reach out to local media. Play music. Oh, there you go. Mo got me. The day after the bombing, they entered the square where the bomb had exploded, sat down, and began to play the cello. You see, this person was a cellist with the opera orchestra in Sarajevo, and music held a special place for him. His name was Vedran Smilovic. And it was through music that he chose to speak to those who would listen about what had happened at the bakery. For the next 22 days, one day for each person who had died, he played the same piece of music. And he called it a daily musical prayer for peace. Can you hear it? When he spoke up with his cello, people listened. One person who heard was Belize's brother, a performance artist in Seattle, Washington. She arranged for a performance of 22 cellists to play 22 different public places for 22 days. This performance echoed the music in Sarajevo and was Miss Brother's way of speaking up. Both of these acts caught the attention of a young boy, just 11 years old, in Indiana. He started a campaign to let other people know about the cellist performances. He thought it was important for people to know that none of us who grieve the losses of war and call for peace are truly alone. Perhaps he wanted the cellist, perhaps he wanted the artist and others to know that they had been heard. The boy, Jason Crow, wrote about these acts of inspiration in a newspaper that he published. And he also started a fundraising campaign called The Cellist Cries On to raise money for a statue to be erected in the square outside the bakery in Sarajevo. The statue would not only honor those who had died, but would remind everyone of the price too many pay in war. Jason Crow hoped to inspire many people to work harder for peace. Perhaps if everyone thought of how war harms children, they would strive for peace. And maybe children would see the statue and be inspired to speak up for peace. Maybe one day war will become a thing of the past. Should people never agree or disagree? That's not what people are asking when they speak of peace. We hope someday there will be a world where people can share their differences in dialogue rather than violence. Someone, in a terrible act of violence, took the lives of 22 people in Sarajevo. No one remembers that person's name. We don't know who did it. But the people who reacted to that violence, not with more violence, but with a universal call for peace, we do remember their names. We honor them by passing on their story. And we remember the lives of those who died by telling stories. When you tell the stories, you are speaking up for peace as well. You may return to your seat. I'm going to sing Tom out to his RE class. Each week, we bring our joys and celebrations, sorrows and concerns with us to this community. The love of this congregation transforms these moments into connection and healing. Now is the time in our service when we connect with one another by sharing our sorrows and concerns. This week, we say a final farewell to music director Earl Naylor on his final Sunday with us. And we pray for peace with the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza. In our community, we remember a stepson and a stepbrother. Remember a stepson and stepbrother of a daughter who served our country as a Marine. We offer condolences to all those who have lost loved ones who perished in armed combat, and pray for the safety of those serving in the military now, and hope for enduring peace. And we say a sad goodbye to a beloved cat who has been with us since a college student daughter's fifth birthday. We hold these concerns with tenderness and compassion. May they be lighter because they are shared. As a community, we also share our joys and celebrations with one another. This week, we share gratitude from Jane Holkelman, whose son Carl is recovering well after a serious bike accident. We celebrate a daughter-in-law who graduated valedictorian with a nurse practitioner degree from NYU. Woohoo! And we celebrate 31 years of continuous marriage and receipt of a negative test result on a cancer screening this week. Hooray for that. We hold these joys with gladness and celebration. May they be magnified because they are shared. With many joys and concerns remaining unspoken in our hearts and minds, please join me in a spirit of prayer and mindful attention with words from the Reverend Barbara J. Peskin. Spirit of life and love, holy within and among us, that which we have called on in thanksgiving and in anguish. Bless the poets. Bless those who mourn. Send peace for the soldiers who did not make the wars, but whose lives are consumed by them. Let strong trees grow above graves far from home. Breathe through the arms of their branches. The earth will swallow your tears while the dead sing. No more, never again, remember me. For the wounded ones and those who received them back, let there be someone ready when the memories come, when the scars pull and the buried metal moves, and forgiveness for those of us who were not there for our ignorance. And in us, veterans in a forest of 1,000 fallen promises, let leaves of protest grow on our stumps. Give us courage to answer the cry of humanity's pain. And with our bare hands, out of full hearts, with all our intelligence, let us create peace. In 2000, the National Moment of Remembrance was designed to, quote, put the memorial back in Memorial Day. It asks Americans to pause for 1 minute at 3 p.m. local time on Memorial Day and remember those who have died in military service in the United States. We're going to do it a little early. We'll pause now in 1 minute of silence. Amen, and blessed be.
Our first reading comes from Army Chaplain George Tiger. The poet, playwright, and lawyer Archibald MacLeish wrote, "The young dead soldiers do not speak. They have a silence that speaks for them at night and when the clock counts. They say, 'We were young, we have died. Remember us.'" I met Scott's father a year after he was killed. It was a pilgrimage for me. I drove 1,000 miles. Excuse me. I drove 1,000 miles every moment wondering if he'd see me as a symbol of a system that had taken his son. When he and his wife met me in their front yard, Mike and I hugged tightly for too short an eternity. As an Army chaplain and therapist, I understand the spiritual, psychological, and physiological foundations of trauma. I can talk hours about how the body keeps the score, about vagus nerve responses, about the flight, fight, or freeze mechanism. I can reflect with you about the spiritual meaning of loss, grief, and suffering, how they fit in your life, and how they can burden the soul if held too tightly. I understand all this, yet not a day goes by when something doesn't bring to mind a young life now gone. Ghosts of what might have been are my everyday companions. I will not let them go, for I fear that if I do that, I will forget. I'm greeted when least expected with waves of unbidden grief, a tightness in the throat, vision blurred a bit by welling tears, a little tremor in my hand. All things that remind me that I will not forget. How many children lost? How many parents grieve? These memories, these ghosts, are necessary reminders of the futility of war and the desperate need for peace in our world. The memories, which come upon me not as thoughts, but as bodily sensations, have deepened my compassion and steeled commitment to bringing peace to this suffering world. I serve in the U.S. Army. I support the readiness of those who have and will fight and win the wars our civilian leaders call us to fight. I love the people I am called to serve, knowing full well the dreadful reality we will one day face again. How then can I speak of peace? This is the difficulty of a holiday like Memorial Day. Memorial Day is not to be celebrated. It is to be observed, scrutinized, and witnessed on behalf of the true witnesses of our human failure to love our neighbor as ourselves. They are ghosts now, haunting lives with the gift of remembrance, so that we will not forget their living, but even more, that the grief of remembering will create in us a yearning for peace that will stir us to action.
The First Unitarian Church of St. Louis strives to be a welcoming congregation, inspiring lives of loving kindness and integrity by nurturing spirituality, building community, and advancing justice. Your contributions this morning support our mission and ministry in the St. Louis region and beyond. This morning's offering will now be received. We said a lot of thank yous last week, but as today is Earl's final Sunday with us, I'd like to say one more thank you. I'm deeply sad. We finally got to a point where Earl, of his own volition, suggested a Taylor Swift song for the offertory, and now he's leaving. For all of your gifts and service to this congregation, and for your gifts and service to this congregation. Thank you.
Our second reading comes from the Reverend Paul Sawyer. The first time I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit. I'm sorry. The first time I ever played taps was at summer camp when I was 10 years old. That was the year I started playing trumpet. So I can only imagine how it sounded. I know there was no way that I could have hit the high note near the end. The first time I played taps in honor of those who died was in high school, when I was contacted by the local Legion commander. He asked if I would mind occasionally being called on to play taps at graveside services for veterans. I agreed. For the next couple of years, when there was a need, I would take my place with the Legion Honor Guard, wait for the 3 volleys of shots to ring out, and play the simple 24 notes of taps as clearly and as best as I could. Each time, the Legion commander would quietly slip me a $10 bill. And that's all that taps meant to me for a while. It was easy to do, it got me out of school, and I earned a little money. And then one day, that changed. The man I was called upon to play for that day was the father of one of my Boy Scout leaders. Now back then, like most of the adults I knew, I thought my assistant scoutmaster was pretty old. But his father was a World War I World War II veteran. So now, thinking back, that means that both my leader and his father were relatively young, too young for their places there that morning as the honored dead and as the grieving son. That day, as I began to play taps, this man who I knew as wise and kind and relatively hard in the old boy, Boy Scout, wilderness leader sort of way, fell to his knees overwhelmed with tears. I am not sure how I made it through the whole piece that day, but after that, I thought I might never be able to play taps again. Today, whether I'm playing it or hearing it, taps means something close to what it once meant, to the reasons for which it was written and originally used. Once upon a time, taps was a signal that the camp was relatively safe. It meant you were not under siege or under attack of any kind. It meant that you were reasonably sure that there were no enemy soldiers to worry about, at least a bugle's call distance away. To a whole camp of soldiers, the notes of taps meant that unless you were on duty, you could close your eyes and you could sleep in peace. I didn't know that story or that sentiment all those years ago when I played taps for pocket money in the local cemetery. But in that meaning of taps, something speaks to me in my heart and soul about dying, and for those of us who remain, about remembering well.
I was 9 when my family moved from Western Connecticut to Western North Carolina. Arriving in the South was a revelation. Leaving midwinter up north, we arrived in early spring in the South, wearing shorts in the balmy February weather. There were other adjustments as well, such as slowing down my New England accent and learning the local slang, some Southern, some specifically Appalachian. Yet more differences only became apparent to me as an adult. In the late 80s and early 90s in North Carolina, the state did not observe Memorial Day. Sure, the banks were closed and people traveled for the 3-day weekend. It was, after all, the start of summer. But state government offices and public schools were open. As a child, I hated this. My parents were sticklers for the rules, which meant that if there was school, went. No taking off early for holidays, no traveling for family vacations during the school year. So when we had school on Memorial Day, my brother and I went, surrounded by mostly empty desks, as resentful teachers played a movie to occupy us. We didn't want to be there, and neither did they. However, that's because we, the students and the teachers, were thinking about Memorial Day as the fun, long weekend that kicks off the summer. The history and meaning of Memorial Day is very different and was the root of why the state did not observe the holiday. There are many cities, north and south, that claim to be the site of the first Memorial Day, local observances that remembered the Civil War dead. An article on the Veterans Administration website tells the story of one early Memorial Day in Charleston, South Carolina, where Black freedmen and white Northern abolitionist allies hosted an enormous and historically significant program on May 1st, 1865, at the Martyrs of the Racecourse Cemetery, where 257 Union dead were buried. However, the practice was in fact most common in the South, where women decorated the graves of Confederate soldiers. The first official Memorial Day was declared as Decoration Day in 1868 by the Grand Army of the Republic, a veterans group of Union soldiers. Inspired by decoration days in the South, their proposal established a formal Memorial Day on May 30th as a, quote, decoration day on which the nation would remember its Civil War dead and decorate their graves with flowers. As Memorial Day spread across the North, states throughout the South ignored this official holiday and continued to make their own observances on other dates throughout April, May, and June. To this day, 6 states still have what is named Confederate Memorial Day. And in 2 of those states, it is literally a state holiday where state offices are closed. In North Carolina, Confederate Memorial Day falls on May 10th. On Memorial Day, many decorate the graves of soldiers with miniature American flags and give speeches praising the nation and those who serve it. Can you guess how Confederate Memorial Day is recognized? Not so very differently, but the flags sure are different. After World War I and World War II, Memorial Day was expanded to recognize the military dead from all U.S. conflicts, including Vietnam, Korea, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Growing up in the South, where the myth of the lost cause infected the culture, Memorial Day held little meaning. Born to parents who started college in 1968, the summer of love, I was raised on a diet of folk music such as Peter, Paul and Mary, Bob Dylan, and the Weavers. I listened to the story of my father being called up by the draft, only to receive a 4F on medical grounds. I remember the installation of the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C., and the anger of so many forced to fight in a war they opposed, and the deep loss of an entire generation. Whether the loss of friends, fathers, brothers, sons, or the loss of innocence and trust. And when the U.S. went to war in Afghanistan, I marched in protest in the streets of D.C. For a long time, I saw Memorial Day as a glorification of war. I did not understand the history of white supremacy that minimalized this observance in the South, and I did not recognize the moral injury incurred by so many in our recent wars. What I have come to recognize is that Memorial Day identifies and names the cost of war. Memorial Day is not in conflict with peace, but is a call for peace. You cannot honor the military dead without asking questions about the use of force, who pays the ultimate price, and who benefits in the end. On Memorial Day, many observances repeat narratives of exaltation that fail to be truthful about who is recruited and who died. We do not honor history by whitewashing it. We do not honor death by removing context. And we do not honor the future by lying in the present. We recognize our military dead by telling the truth and owning complexity. We honor our military dead by learning from our mistakes. We remember our military dead so that we together might make a way towards peace for all. Please rise as you are willing and able and join in our closing hymn, number 117, O Light of Life. Our closing words come from Jennifer Cottrell. We remember those who fought by choice and those who had no choice. We remember those who fought in wars just and unjust. We remember those who died for causes they believed in and those who died conflicted. We remember those who have gone missing and were never found. We remember the civilians who died as collateral damage. We remember the loved ones left behind. We remember, and we pray for peace. Please stay for the postlude, performed by our organist Earl Naylor. When it ends as your final act of worship, please turn and greet your neighbor.